So medieval and like.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Pretty good. I got guys that carry that help all my other locations. He backstops.
Good morning, everyone. I'm leading this group.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
My name is Derek Gates. I'm a friend of Troy's. Used to be.
Formerly.
I'm going to pass this around. If you just put your name, company, or district, and slide in your email address and phone number. There's a test to see if you can actually put in 2 lines.
Are you also like showing some work?
And it didn't, and you want it to be legible too.
Legible, that is
Yeah.
key. Because Kelly has to be able to,
Yeah,
to read. Anyone short of pen?
Hello, this is Keith.
Anyone need an extra writing pencil?
Yeah, I'll grab mine. What the heck?
Okay.
Did they say Hopkins on them?
No, we're not that rich. I have a couple extra examples.
That's a good thing.
Last one.
Just one more here. I'm ready. Are we not certain we can talk done with this? Because if that's the case, let's slow it down a little bit.
I just turned the heat down from, I think it was about 73 down to about 70, so if anybody gets chilly, blame it on me. I think we'll have enough bodies to keep it warm enough.
Did you give away a free door prize today? It's usually
No,
pretty
I said
dead.
Troy.
Keith, it's amazing, we still have 3 minutes before we.
Troy was gonna be here and.
They just showed up. It's like you build it, they will come. Good to hear.
It's pretty deep in here, obviously. So, yeah. What is this? Do we go on the air? Is there a red light or something that goes on here?
Well, you know, it's just like anything else, you have to wait till 9:30.
Yes, sir.
9:30 start time,
Yeah.
3 minutes. I will give you the clue, I'll give you the.
Derek's been gone a while, but I can see he doesn't miss a beat, does he?
He doesn't.
He's just like a well-energized buddy.
Yeah, I know you guys miss me.
Oh, yeah, like
Yeah.
several other things in life. Yeah, I know that. He's usually a good 10 minutes late to make his grand entrance.
You're here on time.
Oh, John Thomas.
It's called the Derek effect.
So is John taking Derek's
Well,
spot?
sometimes it's nice to be predictable.
Today says he'll be in with his newspaper under his arm, you know, walking with him a little bit.
Or is he still on the road there?
And Dave Peterson will be walking him.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Our legislative,
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, they get it all in one line.
Big plans for your week?
Oh, you do?
Yeah, okay, we're up in, a couple days up.
Okay, I was gonna ask if you got
It's fun to get.
Being on the list.
Well, this is, that is.
It's Northwest. And some people live there for, yeah, I know.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, you had been up there all. Yeah, we had scheduled days, Monday and Friday for our days. Mr. Gay, how we running up there from the. We had a grad party at South Park basketball. Yeah, that's a friend of mine from way back, way out for plumbing company. Her boss was there. Yeah. Hey, Derek. Hey, official, those people are coming up for the first time. A lot of broken bikes.
All right, Mr. Gate has allowed us to start our meeting, so thanks for coming today. This is a monthly Transportation Issues Committee meeting that happens usually is it the fourth Wednesday of the month? Something like that, whatever it is. So we meet and talk about all kinds of things that have to do with transportation from the Minnesota Department of Ed. Kelly talks about things that happen in the Department of Ed and how they impact transportation. We talk about whatever might be going on, legislative items and different things. So we've got some guests here today that have some really cool visual effects that are going on already here today. One of the things we want to talk about was fuel, and they're going to be second on the agenda. The first thing we want to do is to follow our agenda a little bit and say that we've got the minutes from last meeting. And those of you who are here, there are a few of us that were here.
Derek, were you here?
Those of us who were here, we take a look at it, and Kelly, I think they look good. I think, but if anybody has any comments, questions about the meeting minutes, none. So if there are any other updates or questions about them, please get them to Kelly so she can approve them. Before we go on with our guests and our presentation, maybe we could just introduce ourselves so our guests know who's here and who they might be speaking to, and maybe they can hone their presentation for those who are here. Although we're privileged to have it online today and or being recorded so people can view this in the future and take a look at what we're discussing today. So, hi, I'm Keith Paulson. I'm from the Anoka-Hennepin School District Transportation Department and work with Kelly on making this meeting happen every month. So, in this direction would be
I'm Jim Stout with Mansfield Oil. I'm the general manager for our Great Lakes region. Very pleased to be here today with Tony.
Tony Yoakum, Yoakum Oil Company, St. Paul, Minnesota. And we'll go over this in just a little bit, but Mansfield and Yoakum Oil Company are working together. I'll get into the details in a second.
Troy Trifles, Assistant Director of Facilities and Transportation at Osseo Area Schools.
Fran Wilkie, Director of Transportation.
Terry Dykstra, first student in Anoka.
Doug Yeager, Hogan Bus Company, Monticello. Dale Mackey, Hogan Bus Company, Service Manager.
Kevin Lundy, Minneapolis Public Schools.
Rob Anderson, Minneapolis Schools.
Chris Wurst, North Central Bus. Kurt Newman, Bloomington Public Schools.
Tom Astracker, Ace from Bloomington Public Schools also.
Shelley Jonas, Minnesota School Bus Operators Association.
Kelly Wasica, Department of Education.
Derek Gate, Hopkins Public Schools.
Thomas Brilliant, Hopkins Schools, videographer.
my goodness, all kinds of ads today. Well, Tony, you're taking the lead on this?
Sure.
All right, well, I have just a story here, and I shared this with Tony when I walked in. When I used to work in another district, we had somebody come in with a low bid on fuel, and so it worked for a while where they were coming in with fuel at a good price. And November got cold early and quick and deep cold, and we were having trouble with our fuel. It didn't work, so I called up Yoakum Oil, and Dick, who used to deliver oil for us, fuel, came out, and the next day sat across the table from me and said, "This is what we'll do. This is the blend we're going to get for you, and we'll take care of it." Never looked back. Never had trouble with it. So, Tony, I know you guys do a great job, and I appreciate that. So, you know, I'm just talking about cold weather.
Yeah.
And we always, you never really know what the fuel is gonna get like until it gets that cold, if your bus is gonna run, and that's always a concern we have, I think, in Minnesota. But before we talk about that, maybe why don't we just talk about what you've got and go from there.
Great, I appreciate the introduction, Keith. And, you know, it's right, we're sitting here in this room, and it's wonderful. This is what makes it all tick, is getting together and working together and finding out what best practices make, you know, our top priorities work. And, you know, with all the little kids and the parents overlooking it and everybody else looking over your shoulder, you know, we together have to do everything right. And that means from fuel to the equipment, to the school bus repair and builders and manufacturers. Everybody's got to do it right. And there's a lot of pressure on all of you to do that. So hopefully we can bring some information today on, you know, some upcoming changes in the biodiesel, what we saw this winter a little bit, and some things that are going around the country that people are doing successfully to help overcome some of those challenges. Just a quick background, Tony Yoakum from Yoakum Oil Company. We've been in business since 1959 and have done a lot of work with a lot of you over the years, supplying bus companies, and know how critical that is. On May 1st of this year, we sold Yoakum Oil Company's fuel business to Mansfield Oil. And there were a couple different reasons why we did that. One is that in our pursuit to provide the best customer service and support, technology and automation, we looked to Mansfield on a national basis to see what they were doing with customers like First Student on a national basis to supply fuel. And as this industry consolidates, it's really a welcome, big sigh of relief for Yoakum Oil Company employees to now have national and regional resources to pull in what's working best around the country. So we've just enhanced really our business locally for all you people that use either Mansfield or Yoakum Oil Company. So Jim Stout is with me today, which is great because he came up from Chicago this morning, and he can also speak at times on what's happening nationally, and so that helps all of us locally as well. So I wanted to first of all just say that I think we've got about 2-3 hours of material that are
Can I jump in now?
Yeah, that we're going to try and do in about 15 minutes, so we've got plenty of time for discussion and everything else. I know you've got a lot on your agenda. I know this is important, so we'll get into this. And I think if there's time in future meetings to do some more work on this, I'd certainly be glad to do that, okay? So we'll try and cover some of the things that are upcoming with biodiesel, with the move to B10 here, and also touch a little bit on the cold flow, and I think and what we're seeing with some of the stability issues too. The big worry for us is, as we change fuel characteristics by regulation, really, both on national and a local level, and a statewide level. What does that do to us? What does that do to our operations? So we're going to talk about B10, and what I want to do is throw a little disclaimer. This is meant to be education, so we're not promoting any product or anybody else. The source material all came from a huge presentation, a lot of resource and research developed by Innospec and from Mansfield. And so I do want to just give credit to them. So let's gloss over the products and the suppliers and everything else and get to the meat of the deal. So in 2014, Minnesota mandated that we increase our biodiesel content. And this has been delayed a few years. We started with B5, and now a couple of years ago we were scheduled to go to B10, and that got delayed. So we're finally here at the point where all the parameters are met to go to B10 in 2014, and that law was on the books. As a petroleum association from Minnesota, and the Minnesota Truckers Association. We got together with legislators early this spring and late winter to say we need to tweak this a little bit. Because originally what happened is that they had B10 going in the summer months through October, which doesn't work for us in Minnesota. Not everybody. Some people can handle it. If you're parking buses indoors, you've got underground storage and heated dispensers and really, have controlled environments, it works really well. It works fine. Minneapolis has been doing that on the public works side for a number of years. So, but each of us have different applications, and we want to keep that in mind as well. So that's the difficulty. We went in and said we've got to make some changes. So here's what we did. Here's the schedule here. So in 2014, January through March, we started out with number 2 of B5. Our number 1 was waived in the wintertime for biodiesel because the aromatics and the biodiesel just weren't compatible. We had some solubility issues, which was acknowledged by the biodiesel people. So April, June, we start out, we've got a number 2 B5 diesel now, ultra-low sulfur diesel. July 1st is when we start our B10 this year. And I'll make sure that I get this presentation on all you so that you've got this. This has been requested by a lot of people. What are the actual dates and what happens? So July 1st, we start B10. October through December, then this year, we go back to B5 in the wintertime. Importantly, this is what we got done here in the legislation. This is big. So for 2014 through 2020, all months, biodiesel is waived. That mandate is waived in number 1 fuel. So that's our savior because of what we saw this winter in terms of not so much the biodiesel, but what was happening with the heavy wax content and the peaks of the wax content in the number 2 fuel. It was more than our typical additives can handle. We had to go to increase usage of number 1 at 60-cent plus differentials. It was a tough winter for all of us, a really tough winter. So by removing biodiesel and the solubility issues in number 1, taking that out full year, now we've got the ability to use number 1 when we need to do that, especially in seasonal transitions to prepare for winter. And that's really important. So that's the Petroleum Association, the Truckers Association, a lot of associations working together with the legislators say, this is what's right for Minnesota. All right? So that helped. So as we look forward now in the next 2015 to 2017, this is the schedule going forward. You've got those winter months of January through March, B5, all right? Your number 1 is waived again, so if you're looking at 70-30 blends, 60-40 blends, things like that, that biodiesel percentage drops because the bio is waived in number 1 fuel. In 2015, we start then in the summer, April 1st, as a B10. And that runs all the way through the end of September. Winter months again, we start October 1st, going to B5. And that wraps all the way through the winter again to March. Much more manageable than what we originally had on the plate. So that's good. In 2018 is when our B20 summer mandate potential is legislated now. They pushed that back to 2018. That's a long time. There's a lot of advances, a lot of things that we haven't even seen yet that people are working on towards biodiesel and synthetic diesel, all kinds of different things. So we'll see what that brings. Any questions on that? Again, I'm going to send this out so that everybody's got this schedule we kind of know. And as fuel providers, we like to go out to customers and say, you know what, let's prepare that. And so we've got a game plan here a little bit later on how to prepare for all this.
B20 is strictly then for number 2 fuel, number 1 is still waived.
That's correct. Exactly right.
That's changed from the last
It has.
meeting in the big time.
It is, yeah. That's a big success. Yeah.
Is that as far as they've gone out as B20? Isn't that the long-term plan when they started this?
It is, yeah, yeah. And you know, this was a push from Tim Pawlenty years back. And really, you know, we're always pushing the edges of what the original equipment manufacturers can warranty and recommend and keep up with. And, you know, they do so much work. There's so much pressure on the engine and the bus manufacturers to perform, you guys, it's just crazy. We change the fuel on them, and changing those engines is so tough. So, yeah, it's, you know, and we can go on, a good source is the National Biodiesel Board, and they've got a good summary of all the original equipment manufacturer warranty statements on different levels of biodiesel. So I encourage you to go to that too when you're looking at things. But a lot of them are really working hard on trying to get that V20 from the warranty standpoint. So what does increasing biodiesel content do? Okay, and there are a lot of myths, a lot of studies out there. This is ongoing data. So as we change engines, change fuel, and everything else, you know, there are a lot of long-term studies that just haven't been published yet. They're looking at this. We've heard things like, boy, it can increase NOx, nitrogen oxide, because you know, it's an oxygenated fuel, and so you're looking at this and looking at what biodiesel brings to the table. There was some evidence out there that it could increase NOx, but really the latest studies showed that it has more to do with kinetic intensity of what buses are going, and in terms of, you know, the specific engine makeups, the routing, the idling, you know, the intensity of the stops. It has more to do with NOx emissions than really the fuel feedstocks. Biodiesel does lower particulate matter and carbon monoxide. So when we talk about biodiesel, here's the really good thing, is that we're improving air quality for our students and our people that are riding the bus, our kids. And so when we talk about that, it is really important. Back to the old days, remember when we had or high sulfur diesel and we had black smoke and smoke pouring all over? Oh man, what a mess, and terrible for air quality. We're a lot cleaner. So bio contains oxygen, so it actually has the theory that it can increase combustion, okay? And it's got higher cetane then because of those oxygen molecules, better starting combustion. But it lowers cold flow performance. So we talk about that a little bit. That's what we're all scared of, is having biodiesel. You know, we figure that for 10% bio, you know, you're dropping cloud point by about 5 degrees as a general rule. But it depends upon the biofuels feedstock, how it's mixed, and the additives and everything else that play into it. When you look at the majority of the biodiesel that we use here, it's soy feedstock. Cloud point's about 34 degrees. So if we're back down into this winter time where we've got number one waved, and we've got, so if you're working with make it simple, a 50-50, it really brings you to 2.5% biodiesel content, right? Number two, B5, number one, non-bio, is a 2.5. So you're really getting down to about a 2 to 3 degree difference is all. You know,
is that at 5 or 10%?
That's at 5, at that B5 level mixed in with that non-bio number one.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yep. So it does lower cold flow performance, but with good handling and good feedstock, we're in pretty good shape for not moving that cloud point up that much.
Is there any evidence or research that's been done? I know, like, First Student is huge into this no idling policy.
Yes.
So they're shut down and constantly starting up, so engines are cooling and heating up. Do you see any advantage or disadvantage or challenges that, because we've seen a number of performance issues. I used to work for them and was the location manager for them and ran into those problems. Any correlations at all? I know with over-the-road trucking, when I was in that, trucks are hot, they're running down the road at high rates.
Right.
So
Right.
I was curious if there's anything from that
it's a great question, and absolutely, I think there are some detriments to reducing idling, because you know there are two things. And we're going to bring this up. One is that, you know, when you're when you're shutting down with higher engine operating temperatures, one of the things that's happening is that fuel then just sits in the intake valves and in the cylinders, and it just cooks. It cooks right there instead of being combustion.
Sure.
So you're getting that gumming and you're getting that asphaltene and that coking effect, especially on ultra-low sulfur diesels and higher biodiesel content. And so you're seeing some things that may, tend to lead to premature injector failure.
Any injector failure?
So, yeah. Now, the whole thing with idling is trying to reduce pollution, reduce increase mileage. So you're getting more out of your fuel. But what you have to do is you have to make sure you're treating with an additive to increase the stability of those fuels so that you don't get that coking effect and that gumming up on the injectors. And that's going to be one of the keys we're going to talk about here. Okay. The other issue is water.
Yeah.
Is that, as you look at, and let's go ahead and look at that. I've got slides exactly on that. On lower fuel economy for biodiesel, your thumb approach here is that if you increase biodiesel 10% from a non-biodiesel, you're talking about a little bit less than 1% loss of fuel economy. Okay, so the BTU content in biodiesel is less than regular non-treated diesel. So moving from a B5 to a B10 really isn't that much. Okay, it's somewhere in that 0.5%. It means a lot in terms of economy and fuel and everything else. But what we're trying to do is get that back to using biodiesel's positive effects and additives
So you lose more when you put more number 1 in for the winter.
Right. Kurt, great point. The higher use of number 1, with less BTU content, you're getting that cold flow performance. So you've got to run and you've got to do it, but you are seeing that degradation in fuel economy. So when we look at ultra-low sulfur diesel and biodiesel together, you worry about both components. And I actually worry probably more about ultra-low sulfur diesel than I do about biodiesel. I mean, that's the bottom line. It really is. Especially with biodiesel being really higher content in the summer months. Then you just worry about the transition. Okay. I worry more about ultra-low sulfur diesel when it comes in the wintertime because of the different makeups in the feedstocks and the wax and things like that. Stability is a huge issue, and this is all year long. And this goes back to your point, Troy, is that ultra-low sulfur diesel and biodiesel both have lower stability than our legacy fuels. Okay, and that means it just doesn't withstand not only to thermal and oxidative stability. It gets into the engines and it just can't withstand those higher temperatures. So we're going to talk about that in a second, and how it relates to oxidation, things like that. Biodiesel is hygroscopic, means it attracts water. So normal diesel fuel can hold about 100 ppm of water, and biodiesel B100 is probably more like 1,200, somewhere 1,000 to 1,200 ppm. It can hold a lot more water. Because of the polarity of the molecules, it attracts water, brings that in, and that's where you're getting a lot of issues. That points back to maybe injector issues as well, if you're getting a lot of water in there. You'll never see anything on the filters. You'll never see a lot of that, but you'll get water pockets in there, and it's tough on injector tips.
Yeah, we had a lot of them. That's a combination too, though. There's a design issue with the BP365 they have, but I think that's a combination of both.
It does.
Plus the cold is just.
Yeah, and the drier fuels in the number 1. All these variables are coming at you, and you're trying to find out what the issue is. So, you've really got to try and corral everything. Waxes we talked about again. I'm really worried about the ultra-low sulfur diesel and what we saw this winter. Just a nutshell, people, is that refineries are pouring millions and millions of dollars in their refineries to become more efficient, to get more number 1 and jet fuel yield and gasoline out of their feedstock. which means they're leaving more wax and paraffin oftentimes, and in different molecules, different chain levels in their number 2 diesel. So what happens is that in the wintertime, you're getting good BTU content in your number 2, but your cold flow is worse because that peak, that chart, if you look at it, of heavy N-paraffin wax is all of a sudden too much to handle at a certain temperature. If it goes down to like 20 below or something like that, all of a sudden that heavy paraffins just come together and they just sink right to the bottom. And that's where you get that fuel gelling when it's stuck right up into your fuel filters. That's the big issue. That's really an ultra-low sulfur diesel issue. Now that can bring components like glycerin and leave that on the filters and grab all that stuff as it's coming down, and then all of a sudden biodiesel gets the blame. Most often the cause is that heavy N-paraffin wax change in the ultra-low sulfur diesel, the water dropouts that's held in there, and then glycerin components coming with it. And we talk about bacteria a lot with water as well. Fuel stability, this is where I get concerned. When we're talking about B10 in the summertime, this is where we got to get concerned. Oxidation and thermal stability of fuel. It's really low in both ultra low and biodiesel. And what that means is that as it oxidizes over storage, with light oxygen, tanks are always breathing, right? They're always living, breathing things. And you get that oxygen in, and it degrades the stability of the fuel. So that creates acids, varnish deposits, even within fuel systems of vehicles and tanks. And thermal stability, once you get it into that engine and run it, the engines are running really hot, the fuel cracks, it can coke or crack and create those asphaltenes that we talked about. And that shows up in different areas. It shows up in injector tips, intake valves. It shows up in fuel filters oftentimes by you seeing real blackened fuel filters. Oftentimes these engines are returning fuel into the system and you're seeing black flakes in there. So if you see that, now you get an idea. Well, stability in the fuel is one of my issues here, and we're not getting complete combustion.
In saying the black in the filters, a lot of people take that as LG or biomass.
Good point. Yeah, a good point.
And then they take that from biomass and they feed that right into biodiesel, and then they snowball it from there.
Exactly.
A lot of it is heat.
Yep.
You bet. But we have, how do you tell a customer whether or not they got LG or not?
Right. That's exactly right. It's a great point. Everybody hears the LG and points out to the microbial contamination. There were some real simple 10-minute tests. We've got actually in our lab a mobile device. We can go out and do that in 10 minutes and see if you've got LG, because the remedy for that is expensive. It's about $100 a gallon. So and fuel filters and everything else. What we're seeing is better water control in our additive systems now, better testing. Everybody's doing a better job of preventive maintenance and testing. We're seeing a little bit less of the LG issue than we first saw with the ultra-low sulfur diesel, but it's out there. It's definitely out there. As we get into new engines too, we talk about diesel particulate filters, all right, and all that regeneration that needs to happen. A lot of you get to be experts on that now because you're seeing these new buses come in. So all these things that can happen really have a detrimental effect on DPF regeneration and longevity, really. Okay, which expensive? They're $10,000 systems. Injector technology has changed. We talked about that a little bit. 36,000 psi and up on the inlet sides of the injectors, and the temperatures are incredible, really hot. So now you can see if you're running B10 this summertime, we don't have that high demand that we do in the student transportation in the school season. A lot of us run charters, a lot of us run a lot of school activity, a lot of different things like that in the summertime. And I worked with a customer that had school buses, and they were running shuttle for the state fair. And it was 100 degrees out, and they were idling hard, and then they'd shut down, and they'd idle hard and go hard, and I tell you what, every one of them blackened filters. It was just crazy. That fuel could not withstand those temperatures, and it shut down. And boy, they had just a mess until we got into it. Unstable at these extremes, forms that particulate, that asphaltene that we talked about. And here's where we see it, that fuel filter plugging, injectors varnish, misfire and fail. And then, as soon as we get injector problems, again, now we're really losing that complete combustion that we want. That spray pattern from those injectors severely inhibited, and now you're seeing a big loss in fuel economy. That's big money going out. Lube oil filters plugging prematurely. Where is that soot from incomplete combustion going? It's going into that into the lube oil. So you're seeing the extended lube oil drain intervals that we're all trying hard to get shortened up again. EGR valve sticking failures and fuel economy detriment that we talked about. So we got all that.
I think we had that this winter.
Yeah, and this winter was a bear. It really was, wasn't it? I mean, it was really tough to handle.
I like this winter.
Did you?
I surely did, because I mean, we made a lot of strides in the industry since 2007.
I thought he was going to say.
I enjoyed this winter a lot more than I did 2007.
Yeah, well, you're
2007, they threw all three of them at us at one time. The ultra-low sulfur fuel, the biodiesel, and then the regen. And the industry across the board was not prepared for all three of those changes at one time. It took us 5 years to figure out that our charged air cooler was our problem. My grandpa would have hit me with a baseball bat and told me, you got to have BTUs to fire diesel. Yeah, I knew that. Well, then you start taking air temperatures at sub-zero into a combustion chamber. There's only so many BTUs that can come out of 24 soda cans. And then everybody's, well, it's a biodiesel. Is it? Or is it ultra-low sulfur fuel? Well, it's got to be that DPF we got underneath there. We had a great winter at Hoagland with the amount of calls I got through the tech line of units actually shutting down with kids on them. So, I mean, yeah, it was a tough winter, but it was a winter that Minnesota used to have. We got spoiled. We got really spoiled as an industry because we get 5 or 6 days and then we get to 40 degrees and stay there. Well, all of a sudden we get 50 days of sub-zero and everybody's going, wow. But I thought we had a great winter. I mean, I thought we had better running engines and longer running engines than what we did 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, with some of those frames with the full fronts and.
So yeah, it was a interesting winter.
Yeah, it's great comments, and I appreciate that. And biodiesel quality has come a long way since then.
Oh, for sure.
You're exactly right. And
not only the engine manufacturers, but the people making the additives that we put in our fuels have come a long way. They got hit upside the head just as we did. The additives that we were putting in. I went to a seminar down at the university in 2008, and it was called New Fuel, New Problems. And that's exactly what we talked about. We talked about the paraffin, the waxing, the water separation. We were dipping tanks, and people didn't understand that the biodiesel in that all together will, if it sits long enough, it separates. Now we got additives that stop that. Well, we were finding water that was 3-4 feet off the bottom of the tanks on 12,000 gallon tanks, and we were finding 3 or 4 inches of water. With the paste, the old stick method. Well, where are all the sensors on your tanks? Your probes are on the bottom. This is all what we learned as an industry.
Great comments. I appreciate that. It's and it changes all the time. Every time we change the fuel, and change the engines and everything else, we're the ones that have to come together in a room like this and deal with it. And as we look at the summertime, as we look at what happens with biodiesel too, biodiesel, as we called it, hygroscopic, and attracts water. As temperatures rise, biodiesel tends to attract more water. That rate goes up. And so in Minnesota, what happens uniquely is that we'll have, some days going into the fall that are 80 degrees, and all of a sudden we'll have a cooling to 40 degrees overnight in a period of that. And so this wild fluctuation, this variance in temperature, really does our fuel a lot of damage. And it promotes that water attraction in there. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in terms of storage systems and game plan. We'll run through this. Most of you know what this looks like. This is a high pressure catalytic reduction fuel system where we got the common rail fuel system where we got common rail and injector issues. And we look at a great spray pattern here of injected fuel and the return off this. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this. This is really a more detailed slide on where deposit locations can actually occur. So, here's your injector tip up here, and really into this, into that valve ball in there, in that section in there is just a big area for getting all these varnish deposits and getting those clogged.
As you're looking at that screen, and not to interrupt, but the way this injector works, you've got the pinwheel that goes down the middle of it. You've got opposing forces on the top and the bottom. When that solenoid on top there is energized, it closes that port, so then it lifts the needle up and then injects the fuel. That port up there at the very top there is very small. It's 2 micron dirt can plug that port. And when that plugs, it fails to full fuel.
Yep.
And composites, varnish, whatever, are huge.
It doesn't take much at all, And that's why we look at, some of the engine manufacturers looking at the ISO cleanliness of fuel. It's a hard animal to get your arms around because how do you do all that? Really looking at the full supply chain, logistics, and distribution. But it's one of the things that we're working on too. ISO cleanliness of fuels. How do you get to that point where your microns of particulate matter and dirt and everything else are much smaller, and filtering that out. So it doesn't take much. These are all the things that we've talked about. Really points to making sure that you've got very strong additives. Not only from a stability standpoint to make sure that the fuel in the biodiesel is withstanding those high temperatures, high running temperatures, but also then the detergency that cleans it. So it's a new technology really of additives that the additive suppliers, we just talked about that across the room, they've come a long way, and they've created these high pressure anti-foulant technologies to really get in there and clean these types of areas. So they've done a lot of studies about looking at the impact of additive on the cleaning with cylinders. They've done a lot of work with Bosch. All the additive companies done a lot of work. This is particularly specifically from Innospec, and they're really working globally with all of these companies as well.
Are these the same pieces we're looking at? One is baseline, and the other part is after the additive one for.
Yeah.
But them are 2 components that ran separately. They're not the same. The additive didn't clean the original one.
Oh, no.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, one's...
It's 2 separate. The way I'm seeing this is 2 separate injectors.
I believe that's right. They probably ran them side by side on a dyno.
It is very difficult to get additives to clean injectors when they're already at that point.
Okay. Yeah, especially if there's pitting, that stuff going on. Right.
You gotta look at that fine print.
Yeah. So that's the blackened asphaltene. So if you see those, that's a good indication that you've either got algae or you've got that asphaltene.
What would you tell a customer when he pulls them to see? What would you tell them off the cuff? How do I tell if it's algae or if it's from heat return, composites return?
Generally, you do those first things. If you see a lot of slime and there's that foul-smelling odor, you typically get with a microbial contamination. Those are two indications. Oftentimes, you've got that.
Okay.
Not always. Not always. You got to test, but that's right away one of those things.
The smell.
The smell. Yep.
You feel it.
Yep. Because of what those, as they're reproducing and emitting,
This is where the industry has to understand how these engines are developed nowadays too. We used to have a lot of return fuel from our heads and that going back to our tanks. We have very, very little fuel going back to our tanks nowadays. If you have it in your tank and it's black and it's as black as what you see in your filter, it's a good indication that you have bios. Algae is what I normally. If it's in the filter itself, then it's usually because you're getting the return out of your injectors back to it. Is a baseline that I use, but.
Yep.
Isn't it a wise investment to test your tanks once a year anyway?
Huh?
Isn't it a wise investment to test your tanks once a year anyway? Just on a minimum, I would say.
Absolutely.
Because we weren't doing it for a lot of years, and I pulled some really nasty stuff one season out. We probably went 8 years, and now they're doing it, I think, every year.
You're talking about each. To include filters.
The tank is not the boat tank.
The filters on your tank, the pumps that you're using, that people don't service them pumps.
Well, here's the best part. Those were pulled off back in '07 when everything was clogging, and then a lot of them didn't reinstall. So they were running without the filters. They weren't doing the tank test.
Yep, that's a great point.
We learned a lot of bad experiences in the last probably 5 years.
I've got customers that will not change fuel filters, and I keep telling them, do the math. Do the math. You're pole vaulting over mouse droppings where you do that, because the fuel filter is minimal compared to what it costs for the labor and the time to put a set of injectors in these engines.
Yeah, absolutely right.
One set of injectors in a 365 alone at list price is $3,600. Then that's not talking labor. I can buy a lot of filters for that.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely right. Absolutely.
And like you said, with the temperatures in the summer and the winter, and the stability problems that we have with the fuel, 6 months. 6 months, you're pushing.
Yeah, it's really something. Innospec has a product called EcoClean. What they did is they worked with Cummins, and to the point where Cummins said we absolutely have to have this, and it's now required by New York City Transit and Massachusetts Bay Transit in their fuel bids. So if you're going to bid on that fuel, you absolutely have to use EcoClean. That's a strong testament to say, you know what, that's a big collaboration between New York City Transit and Cummins work and Innospec globally to say this is absolutely what you need to have. The focus there was an ultra-low sulfur diesel. John Deere has been working on some of the same things. Detroit Diesel confirmed similar issues. They've all noted the presence of this acid-based additive chemistry as well. So if you get refineries that are using monoacid lubricity improvers to bring up their diesel fuel to spec on the lubricity ASTM standard, and they're using monoacid, you're getting a lot of this issue as well in there. So I think we're pretty well set here with our 2 refineries and not seeing those issues anymore. Been looking at injector manufacturers as well. This is one of the things they're really hot about. They did a big Brazilian mass transit fleet as well. It's kind of neat. They looked at the lubricant oil life as really a symptom of this, and saw a lot less soot at the end of this trial using the EcoClean, and then a higher total base number as well. So really dropping those acids that are produced. Improved opacity, which is emissions. I mean, big numbers there. So here's the game plan, okay? When we're looking at this summer and saying, all right, we've got to prepare for this biodiesel. Again, I'm not as worried as much because if we're really isolating the increased biodiesel content to this summer rather than the winter time. As long as we're planning ahead and doing a game plan on how we're gonna handle this, I think we're gonna be pretty comfortable.
The dates were huge that changed from when I was
Absolutely
last
right.
seminar and,
Yep.
and the bee not doing.
Right,
getting
because
the
in
waiver
March,
and
that's
everything.
right, when we did that big seminar, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did change from there. That's where we've been doing a lot of work. With temps consistently above 40 degrees in the spring now, and look at the variations. 80 degrees now, and then all of a sudden you're dropping back to 40, 45 or something like that. So creating a lot of water issues. So and we've got a command labs, but find a good fuel test provider that can get you results at a good rate quickly. Test your storage tanks and then get recommendations. If you find free water, all right, don't listen to anybody that says you can pour a bunch of additive in it. You've got free water, get somebody to get that out, pump it out. The additives like Drytec and things like that, propylene glycol solutions are great for isolating suspended water in the fuel. All right, when you've got higher saturation content in there, but free water, you've got to get it out because that's where really you start building your microbial contamination, the interface between the fuel and the water. Make sure you begin your antifoulant additive usage. Find a good antifoulant and start that prior to, if you can, prior to your B10. Get your engines cleaned up because that antifoulant, that additive technology is so robust, it's going to get in there and clean it. And you want to isolate that before you start your B10, okay? Have dispenser and vehicle filters on hand. Get those systems cleaned up first. If you haven't been using any additive at all, especially, a lot of you have been using performance fuel additives already, and so you'll see a very little probably effect on cleaning. Might clean up a little bit. Have filters on hand. Anticipate that you might get some filter plugging. That's better than doing it now in the springtime before this B10 starts, and certainly better than having this one down the road. In summer, you maintain. Continue your additive usage. Enjoy your B10. Enjoy it. Enjoy your B10. Enjoy fewer emissions, better miles per gallon, power. All right, you're getting your system cleaned up. Biodiesel also has a solvency effect too, so it does do some cleaning as well. If you were just to go from zero additive and run that for years, and then all of a sudden jump to a B20, you'd have major issues because that B20 would get in there and clean everything up. Really good, because a lot of people say, well, I just saw a big jump in my mileage by going to biodiesel. Well, there's less biodiesel or less BTU content, but what it's doing is it's cleaning up your tanks. So you get your additive in there first, get all your tanks cleaned up, and then let your biodiesel do the work on fuel emissions, particulate matter. In the fall, this is the most important time. All right, remember we got B10 through the end of September, so we can get cold then. All right, this is where we really want to start talking about testing. Test your tank. Get somebody reputable that gets in there and tests the bottom of your tank. It's a great time to use products like a propylene glycol type of product where you get it through your fuel system in all your vehicles to just control that water. Because that first freeze is where you see a lot of icing problems in your filter. People aren't prepared, and it draws up into the filters. And then begin your cold weather antifoulant additive. So there's good winterization products there. Rely on your fuel supplier, all right? If you've got heated storage for all your buses, fantastic. If you don't, let's really look at what blends you need to use. This is something I've seen done in a lot of areas too very successfully, is using kind of that shock. Because there's no biodiesel in number one, and because number one tends to be a little bit cheaper, okay, from a differential standpoint, in that late September timeframe, if you can time it where you can get a bunch of number one in there, get some of that biodiesel content immediately lowered in late September before those first freezes, it's a really good idea. At the same time, you're watching your filters, you're maybe spinning your dispenser filters on your tanks, the dispensing system. All those things will really make a big difference. So, critical points to wrap it up. Summer stability issues. Probably my big concern if you're running hot and running hard this summer with B10. In the fall, again, is a really critical time. Water issues, preventive maintenance, winter fuel in every vehicle. See it all the time. You know, you're parking that bus that you don't need, and all of a sudden you need it in December, and it's got summer fuel in it. You see that with contractors a lot. You know, excavators that bring out a piece of equipment they haven't used that doesn't have winter fuel in it. It doesn't work. Winter ultra low sulfur diesel, we can come back and talk about that. And then the spring water issues. This is a very volatile temperature time. You're going to have moisture in your tanks. They're living, breathing, they're accumulating water. And that's what I've got. I've got a bunch of information beyond that, but we got to call it quits. We got to call it quits.
Well, that was 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, that was 15. Sorry.
Well, just from my, and I'm sure we'll open up for any other questions and things that people might have here, but, you know, I always have been thinking about, it's 20 below, what do I need to do to make sure we can run, or how cold can we go?
Right.
Just from your last few slides, it's a year-long process of walking through the different systems. I never thought about summer being hot, and how the fuels respond in the summertime.
Yeah, I think, Keith, I appreciate that. I'll come back in the fall and we'll talk more because there's a lot of development going on with the different fuels and different cold flow polymers and things like that right now. So, absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I would like to say thank you, Tony and Jim, for both being here. One of our major concerns when we first heard the information, and kudos to Kurt, was that there was major concerns legislatively that the state's going to be pushing these out. That was a huge concern on some of the B side where we were going to have buses being down. I'm glad they've made some changes. I still have concerns for 18 if they don't get controls, hotter fuel returns from some of our manufacturers, some way to be dealing with this.
Right.
So it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, but I'm glad they made some changes on that. A couple questions for Yoakum Mansfield, partying up. Jim, do you see Mansfield staying in with the state bidding contract? Because we've been very happy with some of the Yoakum contracts that we've had on the state side, and because they're staying on top of a lot of these additives, it's made a difference for us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no question or doubt about that. We have relationships with a number of states similar to Minnesota where we are their fuel supplier. When you look at Mansfield's business overall, it's kind of like the three-legged stool. We've got a government practice that includes, you know, state, local, federal. We've got a commercial practice, and we've got a retail practice. So without question, that's definitely the case, and there are certain things that Mansfield's doing that Yoakum is not doing that we want to introduce to the state of Minnesota to help them out further. So, without question.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, it's one of the reasons why we loved, you know, this merger between us, this acquisition, because it brought so much more to the table. When we sit down from a state level on the state fuel contracts and look at what Mansfield is doing in North Dakota and Maryland and some of these other states, you know, from a statewide standpoint, it's amazing the support and everything else. It really shadows what we're doing now.
And we do have North Dakota, so it's,
Yeah,
you know, don't necessarily like the super cold weather, but, you know, we've learned to work and deal with it.
I think points that Dougie and some of our representatives have been making here, is we're so different up here in the northern climates when they start looking at these mixtures of fuels that it varies so greatly from state to state, so.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know, and I think from a conditioning plan, what you just delivered for even the large organizations that I used to work for and Terry does, I'm concerned that the messages aren't coming out. To me, it seems obvious that you have to have a year-round plan. It's like a maintenance plan on a vehicle or anything else. You know, you do this at so many miles, you do this at so many miles. I know that in my previous years working for First, we would get the delivery messages in the fall that you need to do this, this, and this, but it wasn't a consistent message across the board. And I think from a national provider, from Mansfield's perspective, that this plan seems like something they need to educate their locations from the First student perspective, because we end up carrying the load when it fails. And I think that this plan, in my mind, and everything I've heard and seen, is consistent with what has been happening, the failure rates and stuff, things that we missed. I know that some locations take initiative and really get it, and others just, they don't understand fuel.
Right.
And the reason they love Mansfield is Mansfield shows up, dumps their fuel, says they're going to blend, they're going to do this, this, and this, and everybody just assumes this magic parachutes on us and we're safe. So I think that's an educational component that they need to work on with them, especially from a partnership, I think. So.
Yep, right. And bringing us two together now with a local, a statewide support system with our office and our team is, you're going to see a lot more.
This seems pretty simple. It's just a matter of rolling it out to the groups.
Yep, getting to every location and really making sure that the plan is being worked.
Well, nobody ever did anything before with Arctic Premium and stuff like that. Everybody just dumped it in the tank and went.
Yeah.
You didn't do nothing.
Yeah.
But till, you know, a couple of years ago when we worked with you on doing, you know, the maintenance program and the testing of tanks and everything.
Right.
You know, that's all helped out. I mean, we don't have any major fuel problems, but, like you say, from the seminars, when they were gonna go to #1 bio and change all that and everything, that was huge, because that would've been a game changer, having all that.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate that.
So why isn't there someone watching the fuel for us? And I know you came and certainly helped me out in South Washington County many years ago. But is there someone watching fuel that has the recipe? I know there's national standards and things you need to do with the percentage of biodiesel and #1 versus #2, but then we're also putting additives in on top of all of this. So is there a standard for regions of northern Minnesota versus southern Minnesota, and do fuel suppliers then say, you know, this is what we recommend if you want to run at 25 below, this is what we recommend you do it. Are there standards out there like that, you know, some of us that things going on, including parents that don't like where the bus stop is located, and, you know, you're spending time there, and you're also wondering, well, how your fuel is doing. Is there some recipe or something that's out there that would help us?
And it's a great point. You know, everything's kind of piecemeal. If you bring it back to saying it's got to start with the ASTM standards, making sure that your biodiesel quality and your fuel quality all meets the standards. Then what you have to do is adapt that seasonally and regionally to what you're saying, Keith, is to say, all right, in the Magellan system, from a terminal and pipeline supply system, they've got specifications that you have to meet by providing fuel into that system regionally here by certain dates. So fuel suppliers do that. So that's kind of the base of it. But what happens even in between or behind that is that as refineries make different feedstocks, you know, fuels change their characteristics and how they perform at different temperatures. And so if a good fuel last year that may have held up really well with a low wax at 20 below, now all of a sudden at 22 just drops everything out because there's heavier and paraffin chains down the line. And so you still have to continue to have meetings like this. Everybody gets together and says, what really works? What have you found that really works? What are the studies from all these different task force and additive companies especially? Unfortunately, those cold weather task force that work together between biodiesel and especially in Minnesota, there's still nobody out there writing this overriding rule. So it falls back to us.
And the scary part to your point is that you can go from here on a trip and you're hauling 60 kids and you don't know how they're maintaining the tank that you got to pull from up north and could have microbials and boom, you're dropping out with freezing cold temperatures and somebody stranded on the road. How do we deal with that without national standards or standardization of how people are utilizing the test?
Well, another point is that trust your fuel provider. If you can over additive. Like if Fleet Pride comes in and says, you're doing 50 gallons of this in your tank, you could be eliminating everything that Tony's doing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely, there are some very dangerous additive things that people. Absolutely right.
Well, I think to just piggyback on Keith's situation, going from local vendors, and no offense to you two merging, but we used to use local vendors and went to national, and national oftentimes are just like our corporation is all around the U.S. It was easier to call up the guy that was 2 miles down the road that knew his product and knew what was happening, and now you're calling Chicago or Texas or wherever, and they're saying, well, we think this or we understand that, and you're going, no, but this is what's happening. They come out and they walk you through some of this, and this is, what really needs to happen.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where you're saying we struggle to have experts in the facilities to know the fuel at the levels that some people need to know, and that's where some of the challenge becomes. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, having national and local support together is the perfect marriage of it.
Yeah. One of the things Mansfield's done over the past several years, and we have a pretty deep database of different fuels across the country and how they respond to various additives. So we can tell you the fuel that's manufactured or refined in Denver, this is how it responds with a certain set of Innispec additives. In Salt Lake, it responds this way. In Minneapolis, it responds this way. There were a lot of things that Mansfield liked and saw in Yoakum from the standpoint of the way they ran their business was complementary to the way we've tried to run our business. And it's the point's very well taken. The local information is really important from the standpoint of, I have this situation here, and it may not be happening at all in Denver. And it's because of the crude oil and the refining process and how the diesel fuel responds with the additives. So we pretty much know, or like to think we know, that you might have to treat a little bit differently here and more number one. We learned a heck of a lot last winter relative to, Tony's referred to several times, the fallout of the waxes and some of the fallout that happened in Chicago with some of the school buses and companies that we supply there. And the additive at a certain point wasn't effective any longer. Right? We had it treated to, we should have been able to withstand minus 20. We didn't get to minus 20 in Chicago. Wind chill doesn't have any impact on fuel, and you guys probably already know that. But we collected samples all over the place and tested them, and back to the labs and the additive manufacturers, and basically what came back was exactly what Tony's referring to, was relative to the wax and paraffins falling out because the fuel itself got so cold. The only way to really combat that, and it's the way we responded immediately, was with the use of number one. People were trying to get by without it, but I can tell you, our game plan going into next winter, and I think the customers will work with us as well, is we're going to prepare. And we're going to prepare before Christmas time, because you think what happened, we're all on Christmas break and the buses were sitting there, and the first day back to school, all of a sudden it's minus 15 degrees, and you had problems galore. The guys had heated garages and went out and started them and so on, no problems. The other guys, you can't say the same. So just rely on your fuel supplier. Make sure that you're doing some testing ahead of time, and you're having conversations before the cold winter comes relative to how we're going to ready ourselves, and then once we get there, what blends are we going to use to make sure our buses maintain their operability.
Keith, thanks again. Really appreciate everything, all of you. Feel free to call anytime.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Very nice. We'll get copies of the presentation.
Yeah, I'll send that off to Keith, I suppose, for distribution.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Tony, one question while you're packing up, don't stop. What is your recommendation for the bus customers that park their buses over the summer? The 3 months that it sits there, what is the recommendation at that time with the stability of the fuel? Empty tank with just enough in it? A full tank?
Generally, because it's that living, breathing thing, they say that the full tank is the best way to go.
Right.
Now, make sure you're using, you hear about the state bill and everything else with gasoline. Use a good diesel additive as well going into those periods, and it'll help that stability so you don't get that degradation. Yep.
Because I've had some of the customers have talked to me about that they run down to a quarter tank and let them sit at a quarter because they don't want to lose that. But I mean,
yeah.
Well, that's what my feel guys.
Yeah, it's going to breathe. It's going to breathe. I think the biggest thing is making sure you're up and running before winter. Get them all running. Get them going. Move them around a little bit, making sure, and then change filters at that time, and then you're good.
So would it be prudent to put the Eco Clean in for like the last tank of the school year, try to get it into every bus? Would that be like your additive for letting it sit and top them all off?
Absolutely right. Yep. Get it through your fuel systems, so it's got that stability component. Yeah. Yeah.
Kirk, are you familiar with that Eco Clean?
No, I've seen it in the seminars and stuff, but I haven't used it yet.
Yeah, it's not real expensive stuff either. There's nothing that you need to worry about in terms of blowing the budgets.
It's good stuff.
It's really good stuff.
You can run all year round too.
Yeah, it can be winterized with your normal winter additive. Yep. We buy it by the rail, so we get the best price for you guys. Yep.
One other thing I'll commit to you guys. I personally represent Mansfield to both Cummins and Navistar. We do business with both of them, and it's test fuels and a bunch of other things. I'll have some conversations with both of them about specific tests using different formulations of biofuel, because they're not doing it today. We're just providing a straight ULSD with no bio, but given the fact that Navistar's making school buses, it's probably something they should be doing. So I'll have that conversation.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate the 15 minutes, everyone.
Now that you know Tony's timeline.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. We have other things on the agenda, and I want to make sure that we make sure that those folks that are here that have some things to talk about have time. Brad, do you need to run?
Oh, no, I'm here.
Okay, just want to make sure. I'm just sure. And Kelly,
nothing real big. I guess the paper annual report is going to be coming out soon. I'll get that together. Still in the paper form, but we're working on it to be a web-based reporting system. But it still isn't there yet, so I think we're fortunate.
Old Business Department of Education updates, I think that's where Kelly.
Yeah, so other than that, same old, a lot of new charter schools starting up, so if you don't have a charter school within your district, you're gonna have one soon. So be aware.
Kelly, where, they're just kind of starting up all over the place? Or
Yeah, there's quite a few. There's like about a dozen of them starting in this fall. And then another probably dozen next year. So there's this process of the authorization, with our charter school group, they go through a process and, get their curriculum and present their plan and get their authorizers and stuff all together. There's lease aid and stuff like that. But yeah, they're in the upswing again. Before there was kind of a lull there that there wasn't too many popping up, but.
Is there some changes in legislation or funding? Or just,
No, they've tightened up things, but they got the authorizer more involved, and they're more of like even above the school board of charter schools, so they have some legal obligations and to oversee that charter school, so they kind of tightened up the fiscal responsibility. A lot of times you'd get charter schools, and what it is too is there's some people that got some great ideas on how to provide education that might be kind of a little different than the typical public school, and that's how these start up, but sometimes their downfall, I think, is that they don't look at it as a business, and how to financially run a charter school is really important. We got tripped up in that, we wouldn't have schools closed. Schools shouldn't close, and these charter schools were closing, and how we were paying them, we'd have to recapture funds. So we got a little more particular on how they're generating their gen ed aid, so we don't overpay them before they close, because there's no way we get that back. So, but yeah. So.
Yeah, they often don't know what it takes to run a school.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about transportation, they think about everything that happens in the classroom, they don't think about
and
they think about the tip of the iceberg, they don't think about everything before. So.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, for charter schools, they get elected each year either to provide their own transportation or have the district in which they're located provided. And for that district, they can't deny them that if the charter schools elect to have the district provided. It's kind of like a non-public school, the equal treatment laws. Whatever you do for your kids, you got to do for them, but you call the shots on how that's provided, discipline-wise and hours and days and stuff like that. So.
any other
No, I think, I'm going to give it to Brad for any legislative stuff. I think there's a few topics that hit the legislation, but.
Yeah, the legislation, there was one little piece I couldn't find that was in the bill, it was in one of the initial bills, and I don't know if it happened or not. It was a real small technical change. It was in one of the original pieces of legislation. I can't seem to find where it
Do you remember what it was? What it was about? I got the.
Dave would have remembered, and it was like, Dave and I talked about it in like February, and then.
I think there was a couple of things. Let's see. Was it House File 2397?
Right, that's the technical bill.
Yeah, there was like a couple.
Well, foster care is in there.
Yeah, foster care, that was one of them. And it doesn't have any transportation part of it, but what it is that the kids that get placed in foster care in another district beside what they were originally attending have the kind of the right, or they can go back to their school of origin, kind of like McKinney Homeless So they have the right to go back to their school of origin, no questions asked, without the open enrollment laws and stuff like that. There isn't any transportation aid or requirements for that. They'd be kind of like an open enrollment, from the border in, unless there's some special ed transportation. But it's just getting the kid back, no question asked.
So, I'm sorry, so that they're obligated, the district is obligated to take them if they want to
Yeah,
stay in their
yeah, if they
district
wanna
of
come
origin,
back,
but transportation is not an obligation?
Right.
Okay.
That's
So
next year.
if we choose to transport them.
That's next year. Yeah, you choose to transport them, you can, but there's no state aid for that.
All right, so they're not 7.3.
Yeah, they might qualify for some Title V federal funds. Sometimes these kids in foster homes, there's under Human Services, there's some Title V money, and that's through the Human Services to see if they qualify for that. And if that's the case, I believe there's some flow that could go to the district.
And that's
So-
very difficult to get from that.
Oh, is it?
Fostering Connections. Yeah,
Okay.
It's, good luck in trying to get them to pay it.
Oh, is it? It's tough, huh? Okay. Yeah, so.
Yeah, the other than that, outside of education, was a year in which a lot of stuff didn't happen.
Yeah.
The DPS bill, hit the rocks and didn't survive. The SEIU bill that everybody here really wanted, that didn't survive. No, that was one where I think MASBO and MAPT and MSBOA, we all were. The SEIU lobbyists kind of yelled at me afterwards for ganging up on it. Well, don't come with a bill that's going to raise costs.
And for those who don't recall what it was something to do with the bidding and how the analysis needed to be done, and
Right.
some certain percentages of savings and costs and things.
If you couldn't save money by going to contracting, if you couldn't save more than 10% by going to contracting, you couldn't go to contracting. So if you saved 9.9%, you had to stay district owned.
And that was across the board, not only transportation services,
Oh,
but
right,
other things.
yeah, school, any kind of, mostly I think with SEIU, most of the folks are working in transportation and food services. And so I think that, those are the two big ticket items on that, but that didn't head anywhere ever. The gentleman that were here earlier talked about the fuel piece, and that was also then changes that were made there, discussed as well. But it was kind of a lot of sitting around and
smoking marijuana.
Not sure. You're gonna get labeled medical stuff on it.
Right. It was big year in terms of. It's kind of funny. You sit there last year when they're putting the budget together and they're spending billions of dollars. It's kind of like there's some fighting, but then you kind of like you narrow that down to like where they're spending like 250 million, and it's like life and death. They're fighting over the last nickels farther. I mean, it's like, oh, the heck with the dollars, let's fight over the nickels. And it's very, means nickels all that up, but it was very, very, it was, knives were out. And they made a couple of decisions, I think, that would come back and haunt them. And the one is that they used $200 million of cash off the bottom line to increase the bonding bill. And I think they might need that $200 million come January 2015, but we'll see how that plays out. I mean, the economy seems to be doing well, but that's kind of varies depending on who you talk to, but see how it plays out.
Brett, did the governor sign the data privacy bill? For the motor vehicle bulk purchases?
I don't know. I can check on that. That's not the one on the license tracking?
It is. They authorized that study, but also I guess they did set a price tag for bulk data subscribers of like $3,000 a month and a penny per
I'll check
record.
on that. I know it was they didn't really talk a lot about that aspect of it. It was more about the GPSing and, you know, all of this kind of, a lot of the surveillance stuff, thanks to it. The national discussion about the data practices has certainly spilled over into Minnesota, and, you know, a lot of people are rightfully concerned about, so there's been a lot of, I see GPS isn't even here today, and, but there's a lot of, it's not much fun to be in law enforcement these days, because everybody seems to be wondering what they're up to, and there's a lot of, every time a cop kind of loses his temper, he's on a, you know, video, he's on cell phone video, and it's posted on YouTube, and so it's as if it's ever fun to be a cop, it's less fun now. So
I'd say everybody, including bus drivers, are being videotaped.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And everything. It's a different world we're in. As we're being videotaped right now.
That's why I'm sitting, you know, that's why I'm sitting well concealed over here. My name is Bob Johnson.
Well, Bob, do you have anything else?
I have nothing else to share.
There was one other thing they think got passed in that House file too, is that prohibits charter schools from requiring parents to surrender their transportation rights. What was happening with some charter schools, they were mandating a waiver so that they didn't have to provide transportation, and kind of made these charter schools a little more segregated, only to serve families that can provide their own transportation. So we strengthen that. Hopefully that will kind of curb that practice too. So.
Right, yeah, I see here it's a charter school must comply with all pupil transportation requirements in 123B88 subdivision 1.
Yeah, so I think they were kind of making their own rules. You know, they get these kind of new wave kind of education. They kind of, you know, make their own rules for transportation. So we strengthen that tie back to the basic transportation laws that all districts have to abide by. So.
Anything else from legislative, Department of Ed?
Is there some sign-in sheet all around? Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, Kelly and John, we've got kind of special ed transportation committee and school bus safety committee. I know there was a meeting last week. John, I don't know if you've got any news out of the committee.
As far as the safety committee went, we had a great turnout up at Brooklyn Park. Had some excellent discussions, one of them on sleeping child, trying to come up with different ways or how to combat that, because we're seeing a huge rash in the industry right now of children being left on the bus. Some of them so blatant that the child is basically sitting right next to the driver as the driver walks out of the bus. So we had a pretty good discussion about that, and MSBOA, I believe, is working on a campaign that hopefully we'll see soon. The other discussion, and it's sort of noted on this this agenda as well, we got into another discussion about current driver shortage and the future of driver shortage, and how we're going to combat that, and what kind of things we can do, going way beyond what their pay is and what how many banners you can put out on the roads and stuff like that. So Keith, I appreciate that, has actually set up sort of a subcommittee to start discussions on creating a plan and putting out the word, and refresh me, I know it's Shelley and I and you and Frank and Troy, right? Yeah, and we're meeting in mid-June to start putting that together, and we'll keep bringing it back to all the committees on how things are going, and obviously we'll look for a lot of input and stuff, but just to give her a little recap, this has got to go way beyond just the basics, because the future of drivers is, you know, federal laws are getting strengthened, state laws are getting strengthened, our driver pool is getting smaller because of the economy. We have to tell the industry that it's not okay to have sports teams that need 3 to 4 buses with, you know, 4 trailers at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not okay to have care and treatment kids going 40 miles away at 8 o'clock in the morning. you know, even down to the basics, that, you know, Frank Zeman brought up the fact that, you know, it's very hard to keep school bus drivers when they're considered seasonal and can't collect unemployment during 3 months of the year. So we as an industry want to, you know, try to put it out forcefully, so at least the voice has been heard, and hopefully everything from MSBOA to superintendents to the legislature can use those to react to them. So we're starting that discussion.
I think we've already started C, by the way. On the agenda. I don't know, anything else, the school bus safety committee?
No, that was basically, the final meeting of the season is June 18th at South Washington County. One of the things that we will do, just as a fun little side note, is we'll have a cake there, because we do have a couple of significant people who have been part of the committee that are retiring, specifically Emily White and Leanne Livingston. But we'll celebrate anybody who's retiring this year, just so that we're not leaving anybody out. But. Yes.
I just had a question of part of your committee charter that you'll be doing is figuring how to bring this discussion to the business managers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, and I'm not trying to, you know, forcefully create the agenda. I hope that it's created as this committee and everybody gets input. But my vision is that we hit all points. You know, business managers, superintendents, like I said. You know, going back to the legislature, you know, I think that we've already had the discussion. One of the things that we need to do is sit down with these care and treatment programs that we school districts are sending our kids to, and say, you can't go at 8 o'clock. We're spending an awful lot of money to bring one child to your program. If you're going to receive state funding and state students, you're going to go at 9:30, and we'll bring you in after our buses are done somewhere else and stuff. But we're going to need a lot more of a voice than this little group to do that, you know, kind of thing. So.
One thing I wanted to add, you know, there's a special ed change that on the restraint, you know, the restraint seclusion. And I think a lot that there's some minor changes to that. But the one thing is that they're going to start requiring districts to report use of reasonable force. I mean, reasonable force is still allowed. And so if paraprofessionals or bus drivers are going to use reasonable force to restrain a kid on a bus, that's going to have to be reported to the state. So that'll be another
deterrent.
Yeah.
Well, it's a challenge. I mean,
absolute challenge.
We deal with it all the
Challenge.
time.
Right.
That's one of the big reasons why drivers or potential drivers don't want to.
Right.
They're selecting semi-truck, dump truck, garbage truck, or school bus.
Right. Especially special ed school bus.
Yes. Yeah. So who complains the most? They're going, well, garbage is pretty good. UPS is really good. And now they're offering $1,000 sign-on bonuses, and it's just, and you look at the liability for it. It's tough.
Any other, Kelly, on special ed? I don't know if there was.
No, I didn't attend.
Okay. I know there was a.
I think it was their last meeting.
That was their last meeting. They had a guest speaker from Brainerd talking about special ed issues. They also had the guest speaker of the school bus driver from Osseo School District, Maple Grove area that had the bus fire back in February, Troy?
Yeah.
January, February?
Yep.
And it is on video. It was taped on YouTube, so please go look at it. It was a great program.
Al's a good guy. He came and talked to our parents, and just a good guy.
It's fantastic to get that first person experience. You know, thankfully on a good way. Sometimes it's even, you know, a bad way sometimes, but you can't get your message across any more than having it come right from the person that went through it, and having those things happen is really good.
Biggest message I think he said to us when anyway was to be calm. Be calm during it. Just kind of have a plan in your head, know what to do, be calm, so that those around you are also calm and just confident in what you're doing. It's very good. I know that we've kind of jumped a little bit to the last thing on the agenda we have here, the potential driver shortages, and we're putting together a committee, and we're going to meet in mid-June, and if anybody else might be interested, let me know. We want to get a variety of people involved in it. And we kind of hit some of the things. One of the other pieces is we have more and more of low-density transportation that is, where we're taking foster care, care and treatment, homeless students, places where the ratio of student to driver is so much different. And yet you're drawing that in. And so we've got those programs that are funded, and there's no real brake system to say, well, wait a minute, do we need to think about the cost? No, we just do it. So it's difficult for us then to continually find people to do that. And so that's when you've got a ratio of one driver to 60 kids or one driver to one student. It takes a lot more drivers to do that kind of thing. So,
Keith, I've been talking about this for years, and districts have, historically, have one student, one driver, one bus, and yet we're going to the same location. If districts could work together, pool the resources, you could pick up multiple students on the way to a destination, and that would eliminate 2-3 buses or potential of helping with the shortage. So part of the creativity I've been discussing for years, addressing this very issue.
And Derek, you're talking about a lot of work with 287 in the districts on that side.
Not just 287, looking at a regional transportation line and figuring how to set up a system that you could say, I have a student that needs to get from point A to point B, and have a system that would be able to look at that and allocate and use resources, maybe Bloomington or in other districts, so you have those available to you that you could schedule and figure out a payment. It's not that difficult.
And I know many of you also have athletics.
Legislation can be adjusted and changed. 2 words in the legislation could change it, that we could set up the reporting and make it happen, because Telly's been intricately involved in the conversation about regional transportation.
I think now with going back the other, that from that last cost allocation change, I would think that would be more allowable now even.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, so we've been working on it for years, and the legislation is already there, so nothing needs to change. It's already been allowed, and there's just a wording thing to allow the reporting to happen, and that's all that we need to address.
Well, and then, take that beyond it. And yes, we all want to do that. So the challenges that we all have is that each individual school district looks at, the amount of time their kid's on the bus, who's going to drive it. You've got some issues between garages as to, well, that's our run versus your run versus you're taking work away from people. So you want this whole drive that we're trying to do is to take it above and beyond that, not just say, well, the law has changed that we can do this, but now we have to go to MSBOA, we have to go to the superintendent and say, this needs to happen because we don't have the drivers to do what we're doing now. We're not going to have the drivers do that. We, using taxi cabs sometimes is good, but most of the time it's not. They're not as regulated as we want them to be. Buying vehicles and then having, it's hard to have a vehicle there for 3 weeks, for the student that goes into treatment, and then all of a sudden after 5 days of treatment, they say, oh no, I guess they're good, we're sending them back to school. Well, I can't have the $40,000 vehicle sitting back in the parking lot again. That kind of stuff. So that's a great seed, but we have so much more that we got to take care of it to get that word out.
Right. You touched on athletics as well as another demand, and not only what they're demanding for one track team where everybody plays.
Right.
So you need 3 buses, 2 trailers, prime time for one high school, and you've got 4 or 5, and that chews up everything. Trying to combine some of those things and maybe reducing or changing days or dates. Go. I know Terry's sitting across the table from me. I've been calling him probably every day to say, okay, we got 5 more buses yet to cover today. How can you do it? And come up with it. Well, if they shift the time here and shift the time there, then we can do it. And we say, okay, and here we go. So there's some creative things in that respect, and combining teams and I've been talking about trying to combine teams if we're going to a common place.
Well, we're looking at, like with Frank Zeman in Minneapolis, we have over 100 kids homeless in Minneapolis alone. having him set up a collector system where you then feed into his high schools or something and transporting them from single site versus sending 15 or 20 buses into Minneapolis. So there's a lot of neat ideas. It's a matter, like Derek said, how do you bring it all together and then deliver it too and then move it out? Those are those key components we got to work on.
Say, John, it sounds like you guys hit on some good points at the safety committee meeting. I couldn't attend because we were short drivers.
Yeah, it's pretty sad when Minneapolis says. Frank Zeman had to leave early to go to the route.
But I've been doing all the recruiting and hiring for Minneapolis for over 20 years, so I'd be happy to sit on that because I definitely see the results of it.
That would be great. And we have Frank there.
It's not just the recruiting, and it's the retention.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd love to participate too.
He's right in the list.
I'm going to say, who does not want to participate?
The committee becomes a large group, yeah.
All right, very good. Is there anything else? I think we've covered everything on the agenda. Anything else we want to talk about today? Believe it or not, we're getting done early. Sorry to say that. Of course, we need to fill the 25 minutes. We don't want to, but is there anything else that people want to talk about? Otherwise, we'll talk about the next scheduled meeting. Anything else we may have missed? Everybody signed in on Derek's sheet there?
Oh, yeah, excited.
I think that's great that you brought in a speaker today like that. I certainly learned a lot.
I thought they were excellent.
I'll just put in a quick plug for the summer events that usually happen. We have the state rodeo this coming weekend, and you can register and sign on that morning if need be. They will take on-site registration. Both associations have summer conferences. Shelley, yours is?
June 8th through the 10th in Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, and Train the Trainer, Derek, is?
July 7th to the 10th. 6th to the 10th.
Okay. So there's all those summer events. Please go to yourself.
Register a lot and register early and register your full staff. For all or part of the event. It'll be well worth it for both.
Otherwise, it would appear to me that our next meeting would be, if we go by the fourth Wednesday, Kelly, would be like the 25th of June. Does that sound about right? That Wednesday?
Sounds like vacation time.
Yes, I can. Be careful here. I'm being videotaped on what I might say.
That's right. You can't razz now.
I'll say it.
So,
what day?
from June 25th? 25th of June, Wednesday. Sounds good. All right, otherwise, yeah. I think we're ready to go with that. All right, anyone else? Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Do we want the next issues or we keep
June 25th?
Yes.
I don't know, to continue Grittyville?
I am, but we're just on.
Keith?